To follow along, download projects and footage from our training area at borisfx.com. In this video, we'll talk more about why you may want to use different track motion options and how to apply the data to various types of inserts. In the previous quick starter video, we've already learned how to do a screen replacement. Although this is the most common VFX task nowadays, there are occasions where we don't actually see the screen itself, but still need to show some kind of interaction happening. Another approach that filmmakers use to do that is to create so-called on-screen text messages. Today we'll do the same thing and place a text message next to our character, somewhere around here. But I don't want it to be just a static image. That would be just boring. I actually want to track it to the corner of the phone. So technically, that would be the same approach as making any other sort of callout. Let's add the image that I've prepared and dive right in. You can follow along by downloading the project down in the description. First thing I need to do is to add a new track on a timeline and roughly position my text message in a frame where I want it to be. To do that, I need to use Vegas picture-in-picture effect. So I head over to the Video Effects tab and search for Picture-in-Picture. Right after I apply it, you can see the change in the scale, but I actually want to make it even smaller a bit. And I can roughly position my text message somewhere here. The next step is to do the actual track. So I would close this dialog and search for Mocha. Drag it over your clip and click the launch button. Now inside Mocha we need to create a simple shape for the track. I would do that with the X-Plane tool and draw a shape around the phone's camera. That should give us enough texture to what we need. I would place the center of the surface over the phone camera just to have it as a visual guide. Now let's talk about track motion options. Mocha is famous for its robust planar tracking algorithm, meaning it was designed to track surfaces. But sometimes you need something as simple as just translation movement. And this is exactly the case for making callouts. By restricting Mocha to a specific motion type, we can avoid unwanted jitter, stretching, and distortion. To back up my words, I would first give you an example of what it would look like if I track with default track motion options enabled. That is translation, scale, rotation, and skew. To have a rough representation of how it would look with the callout, I would use the default Mocha logo insert clip and move it to the desired spot. This is definitely not what we want. The logo jumps around and gets distorted. If we were to apply this data to our text message, it would be simply unreadable and just look bad. Now let me restore the surface position and do it the proper way on the second go. I would track the exact same shape, but now I would disable everything except translation. Let's repeat our quality check with the insert clip. That looks much better. Now we can export that to Vegas. Back into Vegas, I expand the Track Data menu and generate the data for our layer. Then I click on Apply Export, and from Motion Tracking dialog, I can select the layer where I want to apply it to. Our insert clip is called Text Green, so from here I choose Vegas Picture-in-Picture. And you'll see the message that motion data has been successfully copied. I can close both of these windows and check what we have. Not bad so far. We have a little problem that part of our message goes out of frame in the beginning of the clip, but instead of making it smaller, I have a better solution. I would make this text message pop up a bit later in time. First, I would find a frame where I want my message to appear. Somewhere around 1 sec works for me, and then I go to the pan and crop settings for our insert. Here I need to make sure that the sync cursor is turned on so that the keyframes that we will create now will be placed correctly in time. While still being on the chosen frame, I click on Create Keyframe. Then I use arrow keys on my keyboard to scrap back in time for a few frames. 5 or 4 frames would be perfect. Now I would drag the corner of this bounding box to adjust the scale of our insert and create a simple pop-out animation. If that looks a bit too fast for you, you can easily make the animation slower by moving this keyframe back in time. And now I will just cut my event before the first keyframe. I select my clip, hit S on my keyboard to split it, and now I can just delete the first half. Let's check how it looks now. As a last touch-up, to make it look a bit more smoother, I would add some amount of motion blur. Let's search for that in our effects list. You can use the default motion blur effect that is available in Vegas, and that would give you a great result. But I actually end up using BCC motion blur from the Boris effect suite, as I think it gives slightly more accurate results at my taste. The only thing that I changed here is that I decreased my motion blur amount from 2 to 0.5. And this is how you do a simple callout. By the way, if you want to paste your transform data to a simple text, you do not even necessarily need to use picture-in-picture effect. Say I want to track a title to this car. So let me start with the simple text media. Now I will change the text and position it where I want it to be by dragging it right in the viewer. Somewhere right here. I already have my car tracked in Mocha. Let me show that to you. Here is my car track layer. And as you see from here, I tracked it only with translation. Let's generate the data and apply it to our text media. Now inside Vegas Motion Tracking dialog, if I choose to paste the data to our text event, you may notice that there is another option called Location. If I choose that, transform data would be pasted directly to the text location. You can see that from a bunch of keyframes created down here. Now if I play back, the title follows the car until... Oops! At one point, it just stops. That's because the default duration for the text event in Vegas is set to 5 seconds. And when we extended the event, we did not actually make it any longer. We just created a loop. To fix that, go to your title settings and click on this button that's called Match Event Length. The duration for the event has been changed from 5 seconds to 8. Now the title should follow the subject till the end of the clip. We can even reposition the title afterwards by going into the pan and crop and moving the frame around. That gives you flexibility in deciding where do you want to put it after you already applied the transform data. But does it mean that you always need to track your text only with translation track enabled? Well, no. For example, here, I would want to create kinda a 3D floating title that would follow the change in perspective of my clip. I took my inspiration from the Uncharted movie that came out last year, where there was a floating titles that identified the location. I thought it looked simple, yet efficient. Let's apply Mocha and see how we can replicate that. I want my title to be floating somewhere around here and basically follow this tower. But what should I track in order to place it here? Remember, Mocha is a planar tracker, so what I can do is track this tower instead, and then realign my imaginary surface afterwards. I would start with a rectangular mask and draw my shape somewhere like this. Even though these two sections are technically two different planes, I would be fine if I would get just the averaged result between those two. I would only exclude this balcony because it may introduce too much of an error. So I choose my Add Explain tool and draw a shape inside like this. We can check how matte looks. So the white areas is what we're gonna be tracking. Let's set the surface to have a visual representation of the data we'll get. And we are ready to track. I'm tracking this clip with the translation, scale, rotation, and the skew options enabled. I did not turn on the perspective because I already played with this clip, and tracking only with the skew really gave me the most accurate result. This is how our surface looks, and I'm totally fine with the track I got. Now the fun part starts. Let's take the advantage of planar tracking and extend the surface over the imaginary plane we've tracked, so I can choose a place where I want my title to be located. It might be a bit hard to see if everything is good by just looking at the blue outline, so I can use one of the insert clips again to have a better representation. It looks good enough for me. I would only do some subtle perspective adjustments. Before we leave Mocha, I would right-click on a surface and set the ratio to source, so that I'm making sure I still have my proportions right. Cool, let's create our title. I would start with a sample text and put it over my main clip. What this building is a city hall located in Lviv, so that's what I put in my title. I would change the font and the font size to make it look how I want it to be. And as for the color, I would actually pick it right from my clip. Now I need to adjust the scale to make my text fill almost the entire frame. And perfect. Let's take a look at our reference again. You may notice that these titles has some amount of texture. Can we do the same thing in Vegas? And sure we can. Here I prepared an image of a texture that has an alpha channel, and it is also available in the downloadable project. Drag it to the timeline and place it over your title layer. What I want to do is to use this texture as a mask. But to make that thing work, I need to have my text and the texture in a separate nested timeline. So I select them both, right-click, and choose to create a new nested timeline. It will be saved as a new separate project. Inside the nested timeline, the first thing I do is I need to stretch my texture to fill the whole frame, the same way as we did in the quick starter. Now, I would go into the compositing modes of the top clip and set my blending mode to multiply. That also works as a mask. And now the alpha channel from our texture has been multiplied with our text. You can reposition that if you'd want to, or add a second layer of the same texture to add even more details. Whenever you feel satisfied, click on this button to get back to your main parent timeline. Now we have some parts of the background revealing through the text, the same as we have in our reference. The only thing left is to apply Mocha tracking data to the title. You should be already familiar with this process. I'll open the Effects window for the footage, generate the data, and apply it to the title layer as picture-in-picture effect. The text immediately jumped into the right spot. Additionally, I also added a small amount of chromatic aberrations using Sapphire Warp Chroma effect, since our reference also has it. I added it to both my clip and the title and set the value for the Z distance to something very small like 0.99. Alright, now you know how you can use Mocha VEGAS to easily track a graphic element and create a simple callout that follows your object. Join me in the next video where we'll take a look how you can apply this knowledge to do some cleanup work. My name is Elizabeth Postol. See you soon!